August 19, 1942. Dense jungle near Guadalcanal. Japanese soldiers were about to encounter something unprecedented. Lieutenant Imi recorded in his diary the shock Japanese soldiers felt upon encountering American forces. 917 Japanese soldiers had just landed, believing Americans numbered only 2,000 poorly trained men.
Colonel Ichiki dismissed warnings to wait for reinforcements, saying, "We will sweep them into the sea before sunrise."
What these battle-hardened veterans didn't know was they would face systematic demolition of every tactical assumption.
2 weeks earlier, 11,000 U.S. Marines had stormed ashore at Guadalcanal, seizing the Japanese airfield. The island was a vision of tropical hell, suffocating heat, dense jungle, and swarms of disease-carrying mosquitoes. Henderson Field became the key to everything. Control of the airfield meant control of surrounding seas during daylight.
Japanese forces could own the night with destroyer runs, but when dawn broke, American aircraft ruled the skies. Colonel Ichiki's detachment landed at Taivu Point, 15 miles east of the American perimeter, undetected. On August 9th, a Marine patrol encountered Japanese soldiers. The firefight killed 31 Japanese and captured crucial documents.
The captured papers revealed Japanese forces severely underestimated American strength. An attack was coming soon from the east.
Marines established defensive positions along the Tanaru River sandbar, with machine guns creating interlocking fields of fire. Just after midnight on August 21st, Japanese scout Jacob Vuza stumbled into Marine lines with a warning. "They're coming!"
Hundreds of Japanese soldiers charged across the sandbar, screaming battle cries, running directly into a prepared killing zone.
The Browning machine guns opened fire. 600 rounds per minute tore through flesh and bone in the darkness.
Japanese soldiers fell in waves. Those who made it across encountered 37mm anti-tank guns loaded with canister rounds.
The attack continued for hours. Wave after wave charged into machine gun fire, but the defensive preparations held.
Some Japanese soldiers reached Marine positions and engaged in hand-to-hand combat with rifles, knives, and fists.
As dawn approached, Colonel Ichiki's attack had completely stalled. More than 800 of his men lay dead.
General Vandegrift ordered a counterattack. 5 Stuart light tanks crossed the sandbar, hunting down surviving Japanese soldiers.
War correspondent Richard Tregaskis described tanks spitting sheets of yellow flame, flushing out groups of Japanese soldiers.
By midday, the Battle of Tanaru was over. 800 Japanese dead. Marine casualties? Approximately 40. The psychological impact on surviving Japanese soldiers was devastating. An entire regiment annihilated in a single night. Captured documents revealed the shock. Americans didn't panic under night attack. They waited and destroyed with concentrated firepower.
The Americans possessed material wealth Japanese intelligence had completely failed to comprehend. The Browning guns never failed.
Every Marine carried more ammunition than an entire Japanese squad. Artillery support exceeded anything Japanese forces could deploy. Within days, more Japanese forces were already en route. A massive operation was organized to retake Henderson Field. The Tokyo Express destroyer runs delivered 5,000 troops. But heavy equipment had to be left behind.
General Kawaguchi set September 12th for his assault. His plan called for a 3-pronged attack on Henderson Field.
Marine intelligence discovered massive supply dumps at Tasimboko village, indicating a large Japanese force was concentrating nearby.
Lieutenant Colonel Edson immediately understood the Japanese plan. They would attack from the south using the ridge. Edson positioned 840 Marines along the ridge, selecting defensive positions with methodical care and precision. Machine guns positioned for interlocking fire. Mortar crews registered on likely approach routes. Artillery plotted defensive missions. The ridge was perfect terrain for night attack by infiltrating infantry. It was also, if defended properly, a killing ground.
On the night of September 12th, Kawaguchi's forces began their assault. Japanese infantry infiltrated through the ravines.
Small Japanese units probed for weak points. When they found them, larger forces concentrated for breakthrough attempts.
The fighting was savage and confused. In darkness, Marines found themselves in hand-to-hand combat with infiltrators. When Japanese forces concentrated for breakthroughs, Marine mortars and artillery shattered them with devastating precision.
The 11th Marines fired over 2,000 rounds during the night, dropping shells so close they wounded friendly troops.
Sergeant John Basilone manned a machine gun position that became critical. When crews were killed, he continued firing alone.
Individual Marines fought with rifles, knives, fists, anything available. But the defensive preparations held through the night.
As dawn broke on September 13th, the Japanese attack had failed to break through. But Kawaguchi had more troops.
Edson pulled his lines back to the center ridge, consolidating forces. General Vandegrift sent reinforcements, bringing total defenders to 2,500.
The second night's fighting was even more intense. Kawaguchi threw his remaining forces into desperate attempts to break through.
Japanese attacks came within 5 yards of Edvardson's command post before being stopped by concentrated fire. At one point, the situation was so desperate that Edson personally directed fire from the front-line positions.
By dawn on September 14th, Kawaguchi's offensive had completely collapsed. Japanese casualties were staggering, 850 dead.
Marine casualties totaled 104 killed and over 200 wounded. The ridge would forever be known as Bloody Ridge. For Japanese survivors, the battle revealed a devastating truth. Courage and skill were inadequate against systematic firepower advantages.
American forces had not fought as Japanese doctrine predicted. They prepared killing zones and destroyed attackers with coordinated fire. The battles established patterns that would repeat throughout Guadalcanal. Japanese attacks met with overwhelming American firepower and defensive preparation.
But numbers don't capture the horror. Malaria infected nearly every man. Tropical diseases disabled 2/3 of the division.
The Japanese suffered even worse. Their supply situation meant inadequate food from the beginning. Starvation became constant.
American supply ships regularly delivered food, ammunition, and medical supplies. Japanese logistics consisted of whatever could fit on destroyers.
In late October, Japanese forces mounted their largest offensive. Senior command arrived personally to oversee the operation.
The plan called for coordinated attacks from multiple directions, with artillery support finally delivered via destroyers.
The offensive began October 23rd with a preliminary attack from the west. 9 Japanese tanks led the assault. American defenders were ready. Anti-tank guns and artillery knocked out all 9 Japanese tanks in quick succession.
The attack collapsed with heavy casualties. The main assault would come from the south on October 24th.
On the night of October 24th, approximately 5,600 Japanese troops attacked from the south under Major General Nasu.
They faced Marine and Army defenders who had reinforced the southern perimeter with combined forces.
The fighting that night became legendary. Japanese attacks came in waves throughout the night against the Marine positions. Individual breakthroughs were sealed by immediate counterattacks. Machine gunners fired until their weapons failed, then grabbed rifles. Artillery from the 11th Marines fired danger-close missions that landed within yards of Marine positions throughout the night. Sergeant Basilone again became critical to the defense, carrying ammunition through enemy fire to keep his guns operational.
At one critical moment, only a single Marine battalion stood between Japanese forces and Henderson Field. But they held.
By dawn on October 25th, the Japanese offensive had failed. General Nasu was dead, killed by machine gun fire. More than 2,000 Japanese soldiers died in the attempt. American casualties were several hundred, killed and wounded, severe but sustainable. October also saw major naval engagements. The naval battle of Guadalcanal, fought over 4 days, saw intense surface combat.
In a confused nighttime melee on November 13th, American cruisers engaged Japanese battleships.
Most significantly, American aircraft and surface ships destroyed a Japanese convoy attempting to land the 38th Division with heavy equipment. Of 11 transport ships, only 4 reached Guadalcanal, and these were destroyed before they could fully unload.
This was the last serious attempt to reinforce Guadalcanal with a large, properly equipped ground force. No more help was coming.
For Japanese troops already on the island, November marked the beginning of the end. rations were reduced again. Starvation intensified. Captured Japanese diaries from this period painted a picture of slow collapse. Rice rations reduced to 1 ball per day. Disease spreading everywhere. Bodies burned when soldiers had the strength. The realization that no more supplies were coming.
Men eating grass and bark. Deaths from poisonous plants. The deterioration of soldiers into desperate, starving shadows. December brought the final reckoning. Japanese command made the decision to evacuate Guadalcanal. They could not admit defeat publicly. Approximately 11,000 Japanese soldiers remained on the island. Of those, perhaps 7,000 were fit enough to walk.
The evacuation, designated Operation K, would be one of the most successful Japanese operations of the entire war.
Using destroyer runs similar to the Tokyo Express, Japanese naval forces extracted 10,652 men over 3 nights.
It was a remarkable achievement under difficult circumstances, but it could not disguise the magnitude of the defeat. Japanese forces on Guadalcanal reached 36,000 personnel. Roughly 25,000 to 30,000 died from combat, disease, and starvation. 14,800 killed in combat. 10,000 to 15,000 died from disease and starvation alone.
American casualties were severe but sustainable. 1,600 killed, 4,200 wounded, thousands temporarily disabled by disease.
American industry could replace these losses. New divisions trained, ships and aircraft produced faster than they were lost.
On February 9, 1943, American patrols discovered Japanese forces had evacuated. The campaign was over.
6 months of fighting resulted in the first major American ground victory. It established patterns for the Pacific War.
Japanese survivors learned devastating lessons. Courage and sacrifice were meaningless against systematic material advantages. The American perspective on Guadalcanal emphasized different lessons. Marines proved they could match Japanese troops in brutal jungle combat. American defensive doctrine worked. Combined arms coordination was effective. Individual soldiers, properly trained and equipped, defeated Japanese forces.
But Americans also learned respect for Japanese soldiers as tough, determined adversaries who would fight to death rather than surrender. The contrast in approaches to prisoner welfare illustrated fundamental cultural differences. American efforts to encourage surrender had minimal success.
Of approximately 36,000 Japanese troops who served on Guadalcanal, fewer than 1,000 were captured alive. The strategic implications of Guadalcanal extended far beyond the island itself and the immediate tactical victories achieved.
Japan's failure to hold Guadalcanal demonstrated that their defensive perimeter could be penetrated by Allied forces. Allied strategy shifted from defensive operations to offensive campaigns following the Guadalcanal victory, and lessons learned.
American industrial and material advantages could now be translated into sustained military victories across the Pacific theater.
For Japan, Guadalcanal marked the beginning of the end. Experienced troops, pilots, and ships lost could not be replaced.
The decision to evacuate admitted, however quietly, that Japan could not sustain attritional warfare against American industrial might.
Veterans of Guadalcanal on both sides carried their experiences for life. American Marines became cadres for new units.
The 1st Marine Division, pulled off Guadalcanal in December, required months of rest and rehabilitation before returning to combat.
Japanese survivors faced grimmer futures. Those evacuated were dispersed to other units, carrying psychological burden of defeat and knowledge.
Many would die in subsequent battles, as Japan's strategic position continued to deteriorate throughout the Pacific theater.
The island of Guadalcanal itself bore battle scars for decades afterward, with visible remnants everywhere.
Wrecked aircraft, destroyed vehicles, and unexploded ordnance littered the jungle, creating lasting dangers for local inhabitants.
Henderson Field, expanded during and after the campaign, served as a major Allied base for subsequent Solomon Islands operations.
For military historians, Guadalcanal provided case studies in amphibious operations, jungle warfare, and logistics coordination. The campaign demonstrated that modern warfare required more than brave soldiers and tactical skill alone. It required industrial capacity, effective logistics, and technological superiority to achieve sustained military victory. The integration of naval power with land operations became a proven template for future campaigns.
This coordinated approach to amphibious warfare would be replicated throughout the Pacific Island campaigns.
Air superiority's importance was proven decisively at Guadalcanal through control of Henderson Field.
Control of the airfield meant control of surrounding seas during daylight hours throughout the campaign.
The human cost of Guadalcanal was staggering on both sides, with thousands of young lives lost.
More than 7,000 American and Japanese servicemen died in naval battles around the island alone.
Thousands more on both sides suffered from diseases and conditions that affected their health for life.
The story of Guadalcanal is ultimately about the collision of two fundamentally different military philosophies.
Japanese troops encountered American jungle warfare that tested their beliefs about spirit overcoming material disadvantages.
One side believed in warrior spirit and courage, overcoming material disadvantages through superior tactics and determination.
The other side believed in systematic application of industrial power, logistics, and firepower as force multipliers.
The jungle of Guadalcanal became the crucible where these conflicting philosophies met, and one proved superior.
Concentrated firepower and logistics, combined with competent tactics, created military power that Japanese forces simply could not match. For Japanese soldiers who survived Guadalcanal, the campaign represented a profound moment of realization. Reality had destroyed their illusions about American fighting qualities and the nature of modern warfare.
They learned that courage and sacrifice were meaningless against an enemy whose supplies never ran out. Guadalcanal was where Japanese forces first understood that courage alone could not defeat systematic industrial warfare.